following the Justice for Kwekwe campaign and the not guilty verdict in the Timothy Omotoso trial, there has been widespread outrage on social media, with many questioning South Africa's efforts to combat the growing problem of gender-based violence. For more on these two stories, I am joined by Professor Amanda Gous, who's a gender specialist from the Stellenbosch University. Professor Gous, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I guess these two cases that we are going to discuss now are merely just a drop in the ocean, of course. This has become a crisis indeed. Where would you say that the system is failing us? Is it from the South African Police Service side, where investigations and arrests are supposed to be made? Is it the NPA, as we saw drop the ball in the Timothy Omotoso case? Where would you say the failure is here?
I think it's a failure on many dimensions. What we've seen, for example, now with the Omotoso case is the absolute incompetence of the prosecution in this case, that really didn't even know the definition of rape. So it starts with the police investigation, right? So, you know, it's very often very difficult to collect the necessary evidence, because in rape there's often no witnesses. Then there's a failure around the testing of DNA. The laboratories are behind schedule for more than 2 years. Then, you know, it has to go to the courts, where you have often secondary victimization of the survivor, and a failure, as in the Omotoso case, of decent prosecution. So you know, I think that, and then I would say also that there are women's groups in this country who ask for rapists to be rot in jail. And while I understand the sentiment, it is not helping us to do the necessary preventative work that is needed to stop this absolute very high statistics of violence. So, you know, from the side of civil society and the side of the state, there's failures on both sides.
Let's talk about that backlog, for instance, that failure from the state in particular. The backlog at the laboratories as well when it comes to the DNA tests. Today we heard the police minister, Senzo Mchunu, saying that that it was revealed that there was no DNA found on the 7-year-old. But we also do know the slow pace at which this case has been dealt with, the shoddy response as well that was allegedly received by the parents as they're trying to report this matter. We also heard in these bulletins too that the principal of that school only reported the matter after a month, once it had gained traction on social media. So how much can we trust the results that the minister is telling us about no DNA being found, and if we don't know when exactly it was conducted, considering how everything else has been dealt with?
Exactly. And, you know, the question is, how long did it take from the time she complained to her parents till the rape kit was done? If too much time transpires, then you won't find the necessary DNA. Was it done in a sensitive manner? You know, we have been talking about the importance of Tutuzela care centers, where it's a one-stop center where victims can go. That you have the rape kit done by a woman police person. You can get counseling, you can make the statement, everything gets done at the Tutuzela care center. Where was her test done? You know, was it done by somebody who was competent to do this? How long did it take to go to the laboratory? How quickly did the laboratory do the testing? So there are a lot of points at which that test could have failed. And I want to say something else about this case, because now people are outraged and up in arms, but this happens every day on school grounds. Girls just don't speak out. They don't want that trauma. They don't want their parents to know. But this is not an isolated case. And I think this is the problem with schools, is what are staff and principals doing to prevent this? And I'm back to the preventative issue again.
And it is quite a scary one to think of, Prof. Gous, that, you know, schools are meant to be a place of safety, and here we are finding such incidents happen as well at the school. But going back to, of course, this rape of this minor, In some reports, certain media houses have spoken to the mother as well, and she had reportedly said that she too was a victim of rape in Madadiele. There was no justice in her case as well, and now the trauma is being relived again through the rape of her own daughter. Now, is this going to be a generational curse for South African women?
I think it already is. You know, so many women get raped, and they see their own daughters raped. And maybe even more than 2 generations, maybe even 3 generations. Kids are born out of rape. So there's a lot of trauma involved in the sort of rape that continues because we are unable to stop it. And as time passes, it seems to just be getting worse. I mean, you were talking just before I came on about this father who raped an 8-year-old infant. It boggles the mind. So we need to, and I mean, I think there are many people doing research and trying to find solutions. But incarceration is only one solution, and we have to start looking at how we socialize boys, what boys understand and girls about the difference between sex and intimacy, what is a relationship, and that nobody is entitled to anybody else's body. I think that this sort of entitlement to women's bodies is just absolutely something that has become normalized in South Africa.
And also, speaking of this justice system and where things fail women and children when it comes to GBV, in the Motoso trial, the Judge Skuman said it's not that she doesn't believe those women, it's just that the state provided a very poor case. They weren't able to prove their case beyond reasonable doubt. In the case that you've just mentioned now of the father who raped his child and killed the child and has now served 2 life sentences, that father admitted to their crimes and then therefore were found guilty. Is that what it's going to take now for alleged rapists and rapists to have to admit it before it is taken that seriously and before they are actually held liable for those crimes?
Well, that will be a very sad and sorry day in South Africa because very few people admit. And there are men who don't even understand that they're raping women because they don't understand the meaning of consent. So we will have to do better prosecution. And in this case, the state had 8 years to prepare this case. It was a complicated case because there was a lot of grooming going on. So with grooming, the girls start to believe that what's happening is fine. So we need to be much more vigilant in terms of what happens, what type of actions men are taking, especially men in power. And I mean, what happened here was that it sort of vindicated Omotoza because he said the man of God will never go to prison. He is no man of God, but he now feels very vindicated. And what the judge said is that the case was just so poor and so poorly cross-examined that the state did not prove beyond reasonable doubt that these girls were sexually assaulted. And I mean, this is just such a shameful day in South Africa that you have a prosecutor that doesn't even know that inserting a finger in places constitute rape. The director of the National Prosecuting Authorities now, Shamila Batoy, is looking into this. But we're always looking into things, right? And my research has shown that where the state fails women, it renders them into bare life. So what this means is that they are actually citizens under law, but that law does not apply to them, and they can become victims of assault at any point, and you cannot rely on the law to protect you.
That is a very sad state of affairs. Professor Amanda Gous, I really appreciate your insights as always. That was, of course, Professor Amanda Gous, who is a gender specialist from Stellenbosch University.